Tensions surrounding Iran are now getting heated up more and more, and leave Iraq now as fast as possible was the dramatic warning issued by Washington to U.S. employees in the country. It comes amid a heightened sense of urgency from the American side over what it calls the increased threat coming from Iraq's neighbor, Iran. We're now joined live in the studio by Daniel Hawkins. Daniel, the U.S. seems to really have gone into panic mode at this point, and now it's evacuating people from the neighboring countries. What's going on?
Well, Iranian-US relations are complex, to say the very least, but this certainly is a new level of tension that we can see here. The US has issued a security alert to all non-emergency personnel in Iraq, citing a substantial risk related to activity by the Iranians. Now, we don't know what shape or form that risk is going to take. We don't know what's changed in recent times to cause this panic, this escalation. Nevertheless, the State Department does want the world to see it's taking things seriously and there is a clear and present danger. Now, of course, US forces and workers in the region do face some background threat in Iraq, in Syria, due to the volatility of the region, conflicts, the presence of armed groups. This, though, is an entirely different kettle of fish. The alert calls for immediate evacuation of US personnel from the American embassy in Baghdad and from the consulate in Erbil as well, specifically because of the Iranian threat. So the situation is very much heated.
Threaten their neighbors or spread instability or terror.
Everywhere we go in the Middle East, it's Iran, Iran, Iran.
Major destabilizing influence in the Middle East.
Spread death, destruction, and chaos.
The leaders of Iran are racketeers.
So chaos, death, and destruction. Behind every problem is Iran.
What we've been trying to do is to get Iran to behave like a normal nation.
Now, the United States has pushed a military build-up in the Gulf as well. They've deployed an entire aircraft carrier group, complete with bombers, to that region. It's a move that's been labelled by Iran as psychological warfare. Tehran has made very clear they don't want war, they don't seek a conflict, but they do reserve the right to respond to moves they see as an aggression from the United States.
Now, as you mentioned, it is a volatile region. That's nothing new. But has there been anything specific that could cause such a reaction from the U.S.?
Well, over the last 18 months, the root of this recent conflict has been Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear agreement. It was a move criticised by the other signatories to that international treaty. It was amplified by constant saber-rattling, labelling each other's militaries as terrorist organisations, threats of sanctions, and constant verbal threats.
We'll see what happens with Iran. If they do anything, it will be a very bad mistake if they do anything. I'm hearing little stories about Iran. If they do anything, they will suffer greatly. We'll see what happens with Iran.
Well, relations have also been damaged by incidents in the region as well. Each one seems to ramp up tensions, bring the risk of conflict closer, and ramp up rhetoric from the United States. In fact, just on Tuesday, we saw drone attacks on Saudi Arabian oil facilities just west of Riyadh. They were carried out by drones operated by Houthi militants. Days before that, again, we saw attacks on multiple oil tankers off the United Arab Emirates coast. That was described as sabotage by Emirati officials. Now, Tehran has denied any involvement in those oil tanker attacks. They've said this could be a provocation designed to spark conflict. They've called for an investigation. No suspects have been made public, but nevertheless, this won't help to alleviate those tensions. It will only make things worse. And of course, the situation is also of international concern. Moscow has said they've received no reassurances from Mike Pompeo as to those tensions with Iran. They do fear an escalation, and they're not alone in this. Germany, the Netherlands, they've recently suspended their military training operations in Iraq, although the German Defense Ministry have said there's no concrete threat of Iranian attack. Nevertheless, the situation, they said, is down to their tensions with their American partners. Spain, another country, they've withdrawn a frigate from that US carrier group, citing a change in mission and concerns over a confrontation. So certainly things are not slowing down, and concerns globally are growing of just how far things could be pushed to the brink.
RT's Daniel Hawkins staying across this story for us. Thank you. Amid the alarm over Iran, a senior general in the U.S.-led coalition in Syria and Iraq appears to have refuted the idea of a heightened threat level. RT's Kate Partridge has more.
There does seem to be rather a difference of opinion, a breakdown in communication between US military central command and the coalition's second-in-command over the threat posed by Iran.
No, there's been no increased threat from Iranian-backed forces in Iraq and Syria. We're aware of their presence, clearly, and we monitor them along with a whole range of others because that's the environment we're in.
Well, British Major General Chris Geeker, the coalition's deputy commander for strategy and information, seems to refute the Trump administration's claim Iran is mobilising groups in Iraq and Syria to attack American forces. Well, his comments also seem to contradict the claim Tehran is an escalating threat. US National Security Advisor John Bolton has long promoted action against Iran, but the British general says there's little to fear.
There are a range of threats to American and coalition forces in Iraq and Syria. We monitor them all. Iranian-backed forces is clearly one of them. And I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but there are a substantial number of militia groups in Iraq and Syria, and we don't see any increased threat from many of them at this stage.
Pressed to explain the discrepancy, Geeker seemed to limit his earlier remarks to a group of militia in Iraq called the Popular Mobilization Forces. While some are backed by Iran, but the coalition considers them compliant. Yet later, US Military Central Command made a clarifying statement stressing Iran is a threat. Recent comments from OIR's deputy commander run counter to the identified credible threats available to intelligence from the US and its allies regarding Iranian-backed forces in the region. Well, so said Navy Captain Bill Urban. He added, OIR is now at a high level of alert as we continue to closely monitor credible and possibly imminent threats to US forces in Iraq. Well, if both a senior British commander and America's Central Command share the same intelligence, have similar information on terrorist locations, airstrikes and danger zones, how can they give statements that are so different? Well, to help clarify this, RT has sent requests to Operation Inherent Resolve and the UK's Ministry of Defence. So far, there's been no response.
We go live now to military analyst Kamal Alam for more on this. Now, the situation in Iraq has been increasingly unstable as of late, but now the U.S. is talking of a substantial risk from Iran. Is that really the case here?
I think this is more of politics from Washington, because this has been building up for the last 2 years since Trump came into office, because Iran was clearly identified as a major threat. Obviously, the nuclear deal was broken from the US side, and then sanctions were slapped on Iran's IRGC. So this is not a complete surprise. Probably the real threat on the ground is no different to what it was a year ago or 2 years ago. But the levels of escalation politically have been going up every week since the last year.
And a British Major General, though, has rejected the claims. Why do we see this contradiction? Theoretically, they have the same information.
Yes, I think that's quite remarkable. Although British generals tend to be far more cautious and reserved than their American counterparts, this has been the case for the last few decades, every time the alliance fights together. So you'll always see caution from the British side, while the Americans tend to be more gung-ho. But just as you said in your report there, they share the same intelligence, and if there are two blaring contradictions, it doesn't really look good for the coalition. Obviously, one of them is lying, or at least it seems to be that there is clear misinformation from one side. We don't know which one, though.
At this point, Germany has already suspended its military training exercises in Iraq. Why has there been no official confirmation by the United States of this substantial threat?
I think because there's nothing concrete there. They're trying to link various activities of Iran. Undoubtedly, Iran is operating in the region at a heightened level. But if you look at what happened in Saudi Arabia or the ships in the Persian Gulf, the Americans are trying to connect the dots and find a smoking gun which can say Iran is responsible for all these. But there is nothing official, and that's why the British side have said this. And although the Germans have pulled out their trainers and the Americans are pulling some of their staff out, there is nothing concrete that says Iran is moving towards an action which would lead to war.
The U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton has said that he's ready to lie for the sake of American safety. Doesn't that put everything he said then in danger and doubt?
Yes, absolutely. And again, John Bolton is identified as a hawk on Iran even before he stepped into the administration. So there are those who will blame Iran for everything that goes wrong. And of course, there is some justification there. We know Iran's interference in Iraq, Yemen, and other parts of the region. However, when it comes to going out for an all-out war at the moment, there is nothing to suggest Iran is doing anything unusual, barring its usual activity.
What does America's stance mean for the overall situation in the region?
I think it's extremely tense, and we also have to look at the tension between the Saudis and the Iranians, the Israelis and the Iranians. So there's almost a troika of the US, Saudi and Israel who've been wanting at some stage some kind of action against Iran, whether it's because of their activities in Syria, Iraq or Yemen. So the current heightened alert or the increase of troops or the aircraft carrier moving in, it's obviously a lot of tension there. It could lead to unintended consequences. A slight mistake could lead to war. But I think both sides have clearly said no one wants real war. This is just some kind of military psychological operations going on.
Military analyst Kamal Alam, thank you so much for joining us on the program.